It's been live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. In terms of health and safety procedures, I was going to say they'll be shown on the screen, but they're not. So I'll do this from memory. Unlikely of an emergency event, we will exit through the green signs and assemble at the clock tower in the square Te Maraehine. Toilets are in the link span as you entered, and again, unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that is downstairs in the entranceway. We have a couple of, again, in terms of speaking for officers, if you could just perhaps in the first instance, name and title, just for those online. And we have a number online, including councillors Vaughan Dennison and Councillor Orfane Mickelard. So, and there's we'll go through to apologies next. So, in our order of business today, number 2 is around apologies. We've got an apology for lateness from Councillor Johnson and Councillor Dennison for early departure. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there's no comments, we will vote, please. That's passed 13 votes for and against. Okay. In terms of declarations of interest, I haven't received any. Okay. Your votes. Just log back in your card, Councillor. We have you counted, thank you. So that's unanimous, thank you. Moving through to number 3, notification of additional items. I haven't received any. There's nothing from the floor. Okay. Declarations of interest, again, nothing received prior to the meeting. Any declarations of interest? No. All right, we now come to public comment. And before we go to our presentation, if I can invite Sean Kay up around education project. Sean.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Just want to share today the ENAP Stationery Bank. You got some leaflets on your desks. The ENAP Stationery Bank was started about 5 years ago by Boys High students. They started collecting stationery and giving it out to Decile 1 schools around our city. This year, again, we have rolled it by public demand. And thank you to PAK'nSAVE for our infrastructure to get bins out. And we have collabed with Harcourts here in Baldray and in Fielding, and again at Black Sheep office in Cuba Street, where locals can easily donate stationery, and all this goods go to Te Wharikoha in Highbury, and they take it around the city and give it out to the schools that are needing it. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Sean, for the little advert. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, I'll put a motion that we receive public comment. We've got a seconder. Thank you, the Deputy Mayor. The Being no comments, we will vote, please, to receive it. Okay, this passed 14 votes for and none against. The tech is doing some interesting stuff this morning, so just bear with us. All right, we now move on to presentations, and we have Kiwi Property in the plaza, and I invite Andrew Heafy and Linda Trainer to speak to us. Over to you, Linda and Andrew.
Kia ora, and thank you, Mayor Smith and councillors, for having us here today. So, as I said, I'm Linda Trainer from Kiwi Property, based in our Auckland office, and Andrew Heafy is our centre manager. He's been here for 31 years, we're just saying almost 31 years, looking after the plaza. So we've been here for a long time. We're just going to take you through a very short presentation. It's only 4 slides, so it won't be too long. And we'd just like to share, I guess, a snapshot of the plaza and the perspective with respect to rates and the impact that is on our business and also our retailers. So just to kick off, hopefully you can read. That's quite small font from a distance. But as I said, you know, we've been owners of the plaza for some time, and as Kiwi Property as a company, we're actually a New Zealand owned and based property developer, which is actually quite rare in New Zealand. A lot of them are offshore. But we've been in the market for about 30 years, and we've invested about 140 million in the plaza. So that's a sizable chunk of money. And 24%, so about a quarter of the businesses at the plaza are actually locally owned and operated. And we also support about almost 500 jobs or employment opportunities for the people of Palmerston North. But one thing that might be worth noting is that of the top 10 capital value raters in Palmerston North, 8 of them are actually not able to be rated. So there's only actually 2 that pay rates out of the top 10 capital value properties, and we're the number 1. So we're disproportionately disadvantaged because of that, because of our size and the value and our investment. So we actually think that the rates increase that's been proposed really has an opportunity to disincentivise investment and make it much harder to attract ourselves and yourselves, new businesses, to the Palmerston North market. But we also see ourselves more than that. You know, the plaza, I'm sure you've all been there, we really are a meeting place. We're a real hub for the city, and we take that really seriously. We do a lot to try and attract people to our asset, to the centre, because we understand that for many people this might be their first job at the plaza. It might be their first business at the plaza, and we are all about attracting people to the city. We understand we have to pay rates. There's no problem with that. We get it. We just are asking, could we think about whether that's actually a fair proportion of the rates that we are being proposed. So how it works, and this is pretty common across property owners, is that the tenants pay about 2/3 of the operating costs for an asset, which means that they will bear 2/3 of the rates burden, and then Kiwi Property bears the other third. To put it into perspective for you, over the next 3 years, the incremental increase in rates, only the incremental, is $500,000. That's $500,000 more in rates, not just total, that's actually more. So that's quite a chunk of money. And then on top of that, the plaza also has to pay for all their own rubbish removal, and we do that willingly, and we also pay more to have our rubbish sorted, organics, recycling, because we don't want to send waste to landfill. So we are trying to be, you know, good corporate citizens. But what we are seeing is that we believe that $500,000 is too much too fast, and that the move to the capital rating based system, look, we knew it was coming. We totally understand it. There's other councils that have done it, but it is going to impact the profitability of all those people that own and operate businesses in the plaza. And what we are really worried about is that is actually going to reduce profitability, and we're really worried about the investment in the city and, you know, for all the people of Palmerston North. And I'm sure that many of you know business operators. Who knows, you might have worked there at some point. They're all friends and family. And I just ask you, you know, how would you feel if they said to you, did you know the plaza's actually got a $500,000 increase over 3 years of rates? And I have to share that burden. It's quite a chunk. So what we're saying is that we feel that that initial guidance of the 70-30 split was sensible, and we were quite supportive of that. It did change to a 50-50 split almost at the last minute and without consultation. Whether we can change it or not, I'm not sure, but we felt that was actually more fair and equitable. But the weighting between commercial and residential, we feel, is out of whack, and it is disproportionate. And that differential, we're asking if you would have the liberty of reviewing that. We also would like to suggest that that 3-year transition, I mean, you challenge any business to find $500,000 in 3 years extra. It's just too hard, too fast. And I guess we're just asking for the opportunity to say, could we potentially review that? Maybe it's 5 years. Because what we want to suggest is that whilst we may win the short game, we're actually going to hurt the long game. So just to wrap up, we believe we play a significant role of the plaza. You know, we want to be a good contributor. We think, you know, we're happy to pay our fair share, but we don't feel that the current rating is fair. And we just like the opportunity to have that discussion with you. We think the speed at which is too fast. So 5 years would be much more palatable, not just for Kiwi Property, but for all those businesses and people that you know who own businesses. You know, if fewer people invest in this plaza in Palmerston North, it's actually going to erode your rating base. We don't want that. You know, we're with you. We want people to come into the city. We want them to invest. We want them to bring new ideas, new stores, new things to actually make this place, you know, really cool and really desirable. That's what we're all about as well. Yeah, we've invested really heavily in the plaza, and we see that, you know, we want to make things better, not worse. And we really want to see the people of Palmerston North thrive. And, you know, we want them to be really proud of the city. You know, we really want them to come here and see it thriving and see themselves thriving and to have the amenity that they deserve. So we are quite concerned about that. So in summary, we're asking, could we please review the transition timeline? We think 5 years is much more palatable. Maybe reconsider the differential between residential and commercial. Increase the uniform annual general charge and consider that split, the 70-30, really the right split. But look, in closing, I just want to say the power is in your hands. The power is totally in your hands. And it's in your hands to give the people of Palmerston North the amenity and the vibe and the energy that they deserve, because we think they really deserve it as well. But, you know, that actually requires all of us, not just you. It requires all of us, all those people across the road at the plaza, all the landlords in the city, to want to invest, to want to actually spend money to make the city great and better. We don't want to have a situation where people have to start thinking to themselves, do I want to be here? Do I want to invest? Or maybe should I go? Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And thank you for your presentation. I'll go to a couple of questions. So, Councillor Naylor.
Hi. Thank you for coming in and speaking to us. You mentioned that you're aware of other councils who have moved to capital value. I presume you own properties in some of those places. I'm just interested to understand how the rates compare in those places to what you're currently paying at the plaza.
Yeah, I'm just going to generalise because we have property up and down the country.
Yes.
So if I think about, you know, not necessarily Auckland, but Hamilton, for example, or Christchurch, In Hamilton a few years ago, they obviously went to this as well. And after public consultation, they actually slowed down the transition. And you can check with your counterparts. They had exactly the same scenario whereby the change to capital rating was too hard, too fast, and they had to slow it down.
So my question relates to how much you pay in rates for your properties in those other places that actually have capital value. Is that more than what you're currently paying at the plaza?
I haven't actually, to be honest, I haven't actually done that scenario because that Hamilton, for example, taking that into consideration, came in about 6 years ago. So it wouldn't be a like for like basis anyway. But the actual, I'm sure we could find information out, or the councillors here could find that out, but we could come back to you. And
I guess you mentioned wanting something to be fair, and the move to capital value is because we believe it is more fair. So I guess I'm just wanting to understand what you believe is fair, and do you believe what you're paying in the other places that have moved to capital value, do you believe that is fair?
We didn't believe it was fair. We obviously had a voice at the table like we are today, which is great, thank you. And I'm just talking about Hamilton City Council because it's probably the most relevant. They did listen, and they actually did change the transition because the amount that they were proposing, which is not dissimilar to what you're proposing, was just too much, too fast. So they actually had to, the actual percentage, I'm sorry, I can't give it to you right now, it was 6 years ago, but the actual percentage was in the vicinity of what you're talking about. But the year 2, 3 was less than the percentages that you were talking about. So it was quite a big jump, and they did review that and take that on board. And quantum is from a quantum perspective, it's not relevant to the centre here because they're different centres, but the actual percentage was about what you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you. And just second question, if that's right, Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that the tenants pay 2/3 of the operating and Kiwi
Correct.
Property pays 1/3.
Correct.
Is that a policy that's sort of fixed in place, or is that something that's flexible that you can accommodate to ease the impact on local businesses if you chose to?
It's pretty standard. So I've worked for a number of shopping centre companies, and it's all the same because basically how it works is there are common area costs which are borne by the people that obviously occupy the space. Just like a body corp fee if you're in an apartment block, it's effectively a body corp fee for the cost of running the common area. So that is not unusual. It's very, very common. It sits somewhere around 65%. Some get up to 70%, even more actually. I've seen some at 80%. So we're at the lower end of that proportion for the centre. But you've got to remember, part of that is we've made that investment. We've spent $140 million buying the asset. We've spent since then a lot of money on upgrading the asset, seismic repairs, marketing funds, bringing in new tenants that cost money that the retailers don't pay for. So if we bring in a new brand, that's a cost that's borne by the landlord. So it's really comes back to that fair proportion of costs across the common area, like a body corp, but understanding from the tenant's perspective that all those other really hard, expensive costs are borne by the landlord, and we don't ask for any money back from them.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Sorry, just make one comment on that. The fair and equitable, if the plaza was a residential, it would pay 218,000 in rates. We currently are paying 767,000 in rates. So that's where the argument is and what we're looking at. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew and Linda. Just a question from me. What's the occupancy of the how many tenants you've got at the moment?
It would be around the 90%. Currently, we have 7 vacancies that we have pop-ups in.
Yep.
But,
so do you think with the proposed rate increase, do you think that will go to, you'll go down?
There's always potential when times are a bit tougher, and let's face it, times are hopefully rosy and we're looking for a good year ahead, but it is still pretty tough out there, and there are businesses that are closing. Body Shop closed the other day, for the whole chain closed in New Zealand. So we are sitting at 7 vacancies. Just to put that into perspective, at 90%, the normal benchmark would be somewhere in the high 90s. That's pretty normal. So for us to be sitting at 90 is their occupancy is lower than perhaps we would like. So if we've got 7 vacancies, we don't want any more. And any increase in cost when the tenants, with all fairness, the tenant's not getting any more for their money. It's just actually extra cost.
And
Puts more burden on them.
the feedback you're getting of why people are leaving, can you share that with us?
It depends on the tenant, but
Okay.
ultimately, you go into business to make money, to make a difference, and to look after your family. If you can't do that, then you have to make choices.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett, last one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Andrew, for presenting to us today and responding to some questions. Firstly, just trying to understand, I guess my sift through what I could find of your portfolio suggested that we're a bit of the outlier and that the balance of your portfolio is already under a capital value rating system.
Yes, that's what I say. We don't have an issue with going to capital rating. The issue that we're suggesting is that it's too hard, too fast.
Is the speed.
Yeah, it's the speed. We understand that's where the councils are going. We totally get it. We're happy to pay a fair share, but we think, one, we're disproportionately affected because we're we're the highest one out of the top 10 when 8 of them don't have to pay. 8 landlords don't have to pay, so that's not helpful. But the speed of which the transition over 3 is just too hard, too fast. And trying to find $500,000 is actually, that's a lot of money.
So would you be comfortable if we found a correct speed for it to eventually get to 100% capital value?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're saying. We understand it's where you're going. It's where the councils are going. Most of them have gone that way. It's just too hard, too fast. If there was a way to transition over a longer period of time to ease that burden, because as Councillor Hapeta said, we don't want more people, deciding to close up. We want actually people to invest. And it might not sound like a lot, but it's actually a lot for people who are struggling sometimes to make a living.
Thanks. Yeah, which raises for me the second question, which you're talking about, kind of costs that end up being imposed ultimately on tenants in the plaza. And I just wanted to get a sense of the dividend policy within Kiwi Property and what, if any, say tenants get in, how much money is taken out of their pockets to pay a dividend.
What do you mean by dividend? So I'm just unsure of what you're saying.
Well, I understand you pay a dividend to shareholders.
Yes. The shareholders are correct. Yep.
Yeah. Could I get a sense of the scale of that dividend? How much of that comes out of this community ultimately?
Well, it's all in our annual report. All the details are sitting in the annual report. It'll show you the income that comes out of this asset and the dividend that's paid to our shareholders. But I think you're talking about two different things. Obviously, the dividend is to the shareholders that have invested in us, not just obviously at the plaza, but right across the country.
Yeah.
So, the dividend is just their fair return for the investment that they've made. Retailers also have the opportunity to be shareholders. Many of our retailers are. They are shareholders because they believe in us too. So, they can see that if they invest heavily in their business and heavily in Kiwi Property, they'll also get the return, and we'd welcome that.
Thanks. Understand where you're coming from there. I guess what I was trying to ascertain and acknowledging that not everyone's had the chance to read the report is how much cost is actually imposed on local tenants through that dividend policy.
It can't really do that because it's only one asset out of a whole portfolio of assets right across. So, and it's more than just the plaza. So the dividend that goes back to the shareholders would be to do with, what we're doing in residential or commercial space. It's very hard to say the plaza gives this much. We do know what the total portfolio is. We know what the total shareholder payout is, and we can see what the return is from this asset. It's not quite the direct link I know that you're looking for.
Thanks for that answer. That's clear. Finally, you made the point that capital value can be a disincentive to investment. Could you talk us through where Kiwi Property has been recently developing properties and investing in property?
Yeah, so just to clarify, we're not saying that capital value rating is a disincentive. What we're saying is the increase at which and the speed at which is going to, we think, will disincentivize people because it's too hard, too fast. That's all. So we understand it's where you're going, totally supportive. This is time and quantum. Other locations where we are developing at the moment, for your information, is we're developing in Drury, which is in south of Auckland. So we've got about a 50 hectare block that we're working with council really closely on. And that's an example whereby the Auckland City Council are actually working with us to develop a whole town to the point where they're putting in off ramps of the motorway. They can see that if they work with us and help us create a city or a town for the future, and we're talking about building a place where it's not just a shopping centre, there's residential, we're talking about community civic uses like, potentially pools or, meeting places. They're actually working with us to create this whole new town because they can see that if we invest and they invest, the two things come together and make a great outcome.
Thank you. And very finally, if I might, Mr. Mayor, that does raise for me, is there any aspiration from Kiwi Property to do any mixed use investment in Palmerston North, or is it retail only?
It comes down to land holdings and opportunity. So we are, the land holdings we have here are quite tight. So where we are able to have the opportunity to do mixed use residential office, we will. We're a bit constrained here.
Thank you for those answers. Appreciate it,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Andrew. That's our questions done. If I could just acknowledge Kiwi Property for 30 years of investment. Councillors, it's unusual to have in a regional city to have a large shopping centre right in the middle of your city. Most of them sit on the edge of city centres, Hamilton, Tauranga, all included, and suburban use. So I think that comes down to some of the unique and unusual issues that we have here. Thank you also for sharing your concerns about rates. I've been certainly hearing them, but also some potential solutions as well. So I appreciate that. Councillors will look to accept the presentation. We have a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And no comments. We will look to vote, please. And that's accepted as 16 votes unanimous. Thank you. Right, we'll now move through to just confirming the minutes of our December meeting, December meetings of the 5th of December and the 11th of December 2025 as true and correct record. I'll look for somebody else that was actually here. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any matters arising? I'm flying a little bit blind here, sorry, with no tech. No matters arising? Okay, we'll put that to the... Sorry? Yeah, that's what I said, yeah. So it's both dates, so we'll vote on that, please. That's passed. 15 votes for, 1 abstention. All right, we'll now move through to number 9 on our order paper, is around the New Year's honours for 2025 and acknowledge Palmerston North recipients. And I'll just make mention of a couple of former Palmerstonians as well, but starting with Dr. Harinder Singh, and he's been made a companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to the food science sector. And Dr. Singh has been involved in structure functioning relationships within food, providing new insights and innovations in food systems and food processing. He has been ranked the #1 food scientist in Oceania, with more than 500 publications, including serving on 15 journal boards. His work has been translated, scientific work's been translated into findings of business and commerce, and achieved industrial outcomes of significant economic and social importance. With his team, he invented the encapsulation technology for omega-3 fatty acids, which allows the incorporation of fish oils into food at high levels, creating healthier foods. He is also the director of the Riddit Institute and has commercialized world-leading science with many international companies, including Nestle, which has borne significant royalties for Massey University and the Riddit Institute. And he has also contributed to the development of functional milk protein products for the dairy industry and Fonterra, again, gaining significant economic benefits. Our second recipient is Dr. Peter John Cleave, and he's an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to Māori language education. And Dr. Cleave has been involved in the retention and development of te reo Māori since the 70s, including numerous teaching roles at various levels. He has written and co-written dictionaries for teaching te reo, including early work collaboration on Māori mathematics in the late 70s. He's instrumental in driving approval of the first Masters in Māori program at the University of Waikato in 75. He has taught te reo in secondary schools in the 90s and led a team focused on preschool education for Māori and Pacifica children in 2026. He's published academically since 1972 and socio-linguistics and sociological topics. His professional and academic reputation has made him a leading choice marker for doctorates and masters in social anthropology, Māori studies, and areas such as linguistics. He's also been broadcasting bilingually exclusively in te reo since 2000 on Kia Ora FM locally here, and hosts many weekly shows and has co-written a book, Iwi Station, about the development of Māori radio. He has also contributed to the Manawatu in various capacities, from broadcasting, and has been iwi representative on Manawatu Community Law Board and the Manawatu People's Radio Board of Trustees. Professor Angela Frary. She's been made an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to ecology. And Professor Tricia Frary has developed a strong national and international reputation in the field of political and environmental ecology, particularly plastic pollution. And we've seen her in the chamber here many times. Professor Frary has made a significant contribution towards exposing the social, economical, and ecological cost of plastic pollution. She's a leading independent scientific voice in New Zealand amongst many international agencies, influencing international conventions, regulations and policies regarding health, biodiversity, and climate impacts of plastic pollutions. She's been a member of the United Nations Scientific Advisory Committee for Plastics and has had a leading role in informing future governance of the full life cycle plastics in New Zealand and internationally. Her research has informed Pacific Islands policy and United Nations Environmental Global Plastics Treaty processes. Dr. Peter Wallace Allen has been a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to disabled people. Dr. Peter Allen has been advocating for the rights of disabled people since his sight deteriorated, and after serving 20 years with the Royal New Zealand Air Force, Dr. Allen was elected to serve on the social movement Good Lives Matters regional leadership group in 2017. And while serving with the regional group, he was selected to chair the governance group working with senior management of the government's Disability Support Services delivery arm in Mid Central. In 2021, he was nominated onto the National Enabling Good Lives Leadership Group, and he was a facilitator with My Life, My Voice Trust, which provides opportunities for disabled community to attend workshops focused on upskilling, informational and personal development. He's been involved in numerous organisations, boards and management committees, including Workbridge and the blind low and as a blind low vision volunteer. Dr. Allen is a member of Kapo Māori and Blind Citizens and has been a member of the Te Ao Marama Aotearoa since 2023 and has delivered Te Ao Māori experiences for disabled people and for Māori. Dr. Hilary Ann Smith, member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to linguistics and in the community. And Dr. Hilary Smith has been involved as a volunteer service abroad for more than 40 years. Dr. Smith made contributions for more than 7 years as a VSA teacher and teacher educator in Tonga, Papua New Guinea, and Laos. She served as chair of the VSA Council between 1998 and 2007, has been a member of the VSA Appointments Panel and has chaired local interest groups in Wellington, Palmerston North, as president of the Teachers of English and Speakers of Other Languages, Aotearoa, New Zealand between 2008 and 2015. Is currently applied linguistics in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and has co-convened the Languages Alliance, Aotearoa, New Zealand. In her career, has supported numerous countries as a teacher, a leader, including Nepal, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and Fiji. And Dr. Smith has been working with Aboriginal community in New South Wales, Australia, to support language revival in that country. Dr. Helen Julia Snell, member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services for nursing and diabetes care. Dr. Helen Snell has been a trailblazer in improving the standard of diabetes clinical care and improving outcomes, as well as a driving force for registered nurses working in advanced practice roles. Dr. Snell's been involved in diabetes nursing in the Diabetes Lifestyle Centre at Palmerston North Hospital since 1989. She's currently a nurse practitioner and a nurse lead in the diabetes service Mid Central Health. She's developed the National Diabetes Nursing Knowledge and Skills Framework for the Ministry of Health, and she's been project lead in development of a number of online diabetes learning modules for health professionals and consumers. And she has helped advance the scope of practice for registered nurses prescribing and has worked in implementing the registered nurses prescribing authorisation and training pathway across New Zealand. She was the first non-physician president of the New Zealand Society for the Study of Diabetes from 2019 to 2022. And then finally, Squadron Leader Paul Leslie Stockley and has received the New Zealand Distinguished Service Decoration for services to the New Zealand Defence Force. Squadron Leader Stockley has devoted more than 32 years of his career to the New Zealand Defence Force as a pilot and instructor. He's been a qualified flying instructor since 1996. Squadron Leader Stockley has flown for New Zealand, Australia and the United Kingdom. He's served with the Royal Air Force flying and including a tour as a officer commander 207 Squadron, as the New Zealand Exchange Officer who's flown for the Royal Australian Air Force and has flown with the Red Checkers aerobatic team and has led the Royal New Zealand aerobatic team, the Black Falcons. He was a qualified pilot with the Air Force Heritage Flight with a North American Harvard and an Avenger, and has been assigned the only display pilot for the Air Force Heritage Flight Trust. He's continued to be Texan. He's contributed to the Texan introduction into the service, instructing and managing pilots on their first flying instructors course on the aircraft. And throughout his career, Squadron Leader Stockley has filled every leadership position in the Royal New Zealand Air Force flying training system. Also, we have a number of other Palmerstonians that no longer live here. Noel Harris, he received a King's Honour for services to racing, well-known racing identity jockey, New Zealand's leading jockey for a number of years. Sam Whitelock, former All Black and captain, and former Linton resident, and he's received an honour as well. So if we could, we've got their tech back, which is great. So a recommendation that Council congratulate the local recipients of the New Year's Honours 2025. I'm quite happy to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any other comments? No? All right, we'll vote, please. Sorry, Councillor Johnson, did you want to speak to that?
No, I didn't. Sorry. There was just no option to abstain. Not that I was going to abstain anyway, so it didn't matter. Thank you. Are we voting again?
We will vote again.
Okay, thank you.
It's passed 16 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right. We'll come to number 10 on our order paper, and this is around the local water done well approval for consultation to our community. And I invite Julie Keane, our transition manager for waters, Mike Monahan, our group manager for Three Waters, and Olivia Wicks, comms manager. Welcome. Oh, and we've got Scott Nancy, our finance manager as well. Okay, page 39 of your papers, and you'll actually have this draft document as well. Over to you. Thanks, Mike.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mike Monahan, Te Wingwa. Good morning, Your Worship, the Mayor and Councillors. It's really great to be here presenting this today, and it feels quite appropriate for this to be the first officer paper of the year, because it's a relatively significant decision for Council to be going forward with. Council will remember on the 5th of December that we agreed 3 options to consult the community on, including your preferred option. Since that time, the teams have been hard at work to produce this document before you today, and I think it's fair to say that a tremendous amount of work has gone into this. You'll notice in the report that we make mention of Bill 3. We'll be bringing a paper back to you next week with Council's submission to be discussed for Bill 3, but it was important to understand that Bill 3 played a bit of a significant role in the content of the document that's in front of you today. Since the 5th of December, a lot of work has gone into establishing relationships with councils within your preferred option, and I know the CEs have been working closely together as well. What I'm going to do now is ask Liv to maybe talk us through some of the points within the document for you.
Good morning, and yeah, Happy New Year. As Mike alluded there, this has been a big job pulling this together, and part of that is because of the Bill 3 requirements. So there is a large amount of requirements for what needed to be in the consultation document. Which I will just say, if you have read parts of it and you're thinking, oh, I wonder why they put that in there, there's a good chance that's because the law has told us we need to. We did also, just for your awareness, share our draft consultation document with iwi and with the councils across our options for their awareness. With our submission form, we just wanted to show you that. I think we talked about it a bit in the December meeting. We've kept it really nice and simple. We have put the value criteria up the top. So that was the same ones that got us to where our preferred options are. So keeping that consistent. And also important that we had that at the top so people were thinking about that when choosing their options as well. We haven't gone specific on any values-based questions, just to ensure that everyone realises that all values are, equally important and none has greater weight when it comes to your decision making. I just wanted to clarify, you might wonder why we've asked for 6, and that was because when a group of us sat there and tried to figure out what we would pick, we all got at least 6. They were kind of the non-negotiables that we could all see that everyone would value equally. I just wanted to touch also on our timeframes for consultation. So the reason we are consulting over this time period, it was really important that we tried not to consult during the annual budget. Those of you who were around, not the last LTP, but the LTP before, will remember we consulted with the LTP and nature calls at the same time. And it was really kind of confusing for our community to try and keep the two separate and not be confused. And then the other reason is we have a significant number of city events that we have the option to engage with potentially tens of thousands of people with during our consultation period. So Rural Games, Esplanade Day, Central Field Days, Festival of Cultures, just to name a few. In terms of feedback today, we'll be taking notes of that and making those changes to our consultation document. In terms of our engagement, first of all, I'll just start with staff. We've always kept our colleagues and our teams really well informed, and on Friday we talked through what we're talking with you about today. Obviously during consultation, lots of them are out and about and in the front line with our community, and we wanted to make sure they were aware of it, but also that they knew where to refer people to for more information. The public engagement will be significant, similar to LTP, due to the significance of the decision. We're in our education period at the moment. There's a flyer in the rates invoice this week. We've had some tours at our wastewater plant. We've had radio and newspaper advertising. We've got a bit of a website hub and a display at our customer service centre. During consultation itself, we will have sector sessions. We will have drop-ins around our community libraries. Presentations to our reference groups. As I said, we'll be at those events. We'll continue to have some treatment plant tours, visiting some schools. We will be sending a booklet to homes and a range of different types of other promotion of the consultation and how people can have their say. While we do it the formal submission form, people can give us submissions in other ways, just like they did with the LTP. So you might get the odd video or drawing or something like that if people choose to do so. Just the last couple of points. We just wanted to explain that hearings will follow quite quickly after consultation. And when we talked to you in December, we had planned on having the decision and signing off the plan on the same day, but obviously we've realised we need a decision before we can pull together the plan. So we're going to bring that decision forward now to May 7. And all of the councils within our preferred option are looking at making a decision within a week of each other, or even a couple of days if we can align that. That's it from me. I'll pass over to Scott.
Cool. Thanks, Liv. So firstly, in the consultation document, you'll notice some change in the numbers from the numbers that we had at the December meeting. We've used the same financial modelling firm this time around, so that the same company has modelled all 3 options for us for consistency. And we've also used inflated numbers, much like the LTP. So since the December meeting and now, teams around the different options have checked the inputs into the financial model. We've done a lot of work in that space, and I know the CFOs have been meeting regularly to check and validate all of the assumptions that have been put into those models to give us the results that you see today. We're intending on releasing the report from Morrison Lowe to support this consultation information. There's a couple of references in the document to the website where people will be able to read through those assumptions and things like that as supporting information, much like we do with a budget or an LTP. The financial model is not accurate over the full 30 years. As you can imagine, 30 years is a long time, and things can change relatively quickly or significantly over that time. So the model is designed to show the trends over time, and the trends are downwards over that second 2 lots of 10-year periods. The numbers in the document are harmonised at year 1 at this point. So harmonisation is where all the councils across the area of the CCO would be paying the same as everyone else. I know even just yesterday at the CFO's meeting, there was a request for additional modelling around that harmonisation piece. So I would imagine if an option with multiple councils CCO is chosen, that is going to be a setup of CCO discussion and negotiation amongst the member councils for that. Regarding option 2, the figures that we've stated includes all 7 councils in the Horizons region. As you know, some councils have indicated that that's not their preferred options, so the numbers would change there. However, we've just allowed for things as a full 7 council CCO there. So the cost will change depending on the actual makeup of that CCO. And with that, look to open up to any questions.
That's it? Okay, all right. Before I go to Councillor Johnson, a couple of questions from me. Can I ask why we've added inflation, especially being, you know, a big project and a 10-year project? You're literally guessing what inflation's going to be and adding it on top. Would it not be better to have a real figure that you know what you're dealing with and just say, be very, very clear around this does not include inflation?
Yes, you can show it both ways. I guess the inflated number shows what the likely household costs are more likely to be. However, just like an uninflated number, the series of assumptions that are made in that period can also influence that. If we want to put uninflated numbers in the document, then I'm sure we could request that and have a look at the phrasing.
I mean, you're a finance person. You've obviously, somebody's made a call, somebody has made a call on what that inflation figure is going to be in year 10.
Yes, the same as what's in our LTP.
So how do you do that when you don't know what it is?
For the LTP, we rely on an organisation called Burl.
I know who Burl is. Yeah.
So we rely on those assumptions and the economists that feed into those.
But they're still guessing as well, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay. And it includes also the figures you've got there includes the full 480 million for nature calls, doesn't it?
Yes.
So that if there was, I'm just guessing here, but if there was some other option or whatever, that could potentially change.
Another option in regards to...
Well, I mean, let's say there's another option appears and because there's wastewater standards coming nationally.
Yep.
That could change that figure quite considerably, couldn't it?
Yes, it could.
Potentially.
Potentially, yep.
Okay. Councillor Johnson. Sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, team. I guess more questions for you, Scott. So in paragraph 2.8, you've said that the costs of the option with the 7 councils will obviously change if one or more of those councils drops out. I'm a little bit concerned that we're going out to consult. We've put a headline figure in for that option, but we know already that that's not really going to be the figure because we know as a number of those councils have said that that's not their preferred option. So is there any way that we could be a bit clearer about that to people? Because, you know, I know a lot of people won't delve right down into the detail. They'll look at the headline figures. They'll say, oh, this one looks cheaper. Let's go for that one. But we know that we're not going to have the option of 7 councils going together there. So, I mean, how can we represent that more accurately to the public in the document, do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess as of right now, the 7's not an option. It could be an option in the future. So it is very much a point in time there as well. And we haven't asked Morrison Lowe to model any number of scenarios with the 7. We've really asked them to focus on the 4 and a comparison of the 7 to give that true apples with apples comparison. Chatting with Liv, believe it or not, this was something we were chatting about earlier this week, and just how we make sure that it's really clear about which councils are potentially involved in that. And I guess until every council makes their decision on their options for consultation, we aren't going to be able to easily know which of the 7 councils are in or out. We obviously know what they are today, but it could change in 2 weeks' time.
So, I mean, I can foresee a scenario where we get a bunch of submissions in, people saying, oh, yeah, we like option 2, I think it is, you know, and then that option isn't actually available to us. So where does that leave us then for decision making?
The option 2 is any number of councils. So I guess the option 1 is the 4 council CCO. Option 2 is any number of 7 and potentially Kapiti Coast if it was to be included. So my understanding is that that option gives us the ability, if councils come in or go out of that model. So it's not a purely 7, it's any number of councils in that option.
Okay, so when we're getting the submissions in from people, if people say, well, we just want the cheapest one, whatever that might be, because we don't actually know at this point, have we got some way of capturing that through the submission forms?
On your first question, one other thing we could potentially do is on the submission form for option 3, we have in brackets, not financially sustainable. We could also add a bracket under option 2, just again reiterating that that includes the 7 councils, and that's unlikely at this point. So like another reminder at that point of making that submission, that's another place that we could also confirm that. Yes, we will get that through all of the commentary on each of the options and the other comments. Confident of that.
I mean, I guess if I was a member of the public, I might be asking, well, why are you consulting when you don't know what you're consulting on? And so what would the answer be to that? I mean, I think I know, but I'd like to hear you say it.
Do you want me to have a go? Look, Wade's got his finger on the pulse. I'll refer to him first.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a fair
Yeah,
question?
through the chair, a totally fair question, and I think that this just sort of highlights the complexity of this particular issue. And so option 2 is effectively our council going with potentially any other council across the Manawatu Whanganui region. Under the GHD modelling that we did previously, we have modelled what it would look like with, you know, and other councils asked with Palmy in and Palmy out, and doing a whole range of different scenarios in around it. I guess what we could do is, and just sort of thinking about it on the fly, is whether or not there's some further information that we could make available either via our website or whatever about what different possible connections might look like with other councils. For instance, just us with Manawatu, or just us with Horowhenua, or those sorts of things, and just provide some further detail and around that maybe just points people in the right direction to be able to make a decent decision. But yeah, that has been something that's been clearly on our mind, and we're struggling with a little bit, but there's ways that maybe we could do that.
And so why are we consulting now when we don't have the answers?
We are consulting. Obviously, we've got timeframes that we need to be able to make a decision about which way that you're wishing to go. But equally, the same questions that you're asking of us here, the elected members and other councils will be asking exactly the same questions, I'd suggest. And again, it just comes back to the complexity of it. We do have a time frame on which we need to be able to get this through. Option 2, which is effectively what we've done, is best case scenario is that if all councils across the Manawatu Whanganui region decided to join together, that's potentially what the trend or the model is showing us what the cost would be. We already know that Horowhenua and Manawatu have made decisions that they don't wish to pursue a regional model. So effectively what we're saying on that one is that it is highly likely it will be less than all 7 councils across the region. But coming to your point, we probably do need to maybe think about how we get some further detail on our website about, well, what does it look like with Manawatu and Horowhenua out, and with the rest in.
And especially costings, I would say.
Yeah, so we'll cover that.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Look, thanks, Councillor. I think you brought up a really good topic. I'm uncomfortable with what you've got in here now, because I know TDC, Wanganui, Rangitikei are not going in this model. So I just think factually it's not right. So rather than just putting it on the website, and I get that's the cheap and easy part, you've got to adjust this. Somehow you need to put some of those semi-shaded, these blue areas are not going to eventuate. We know that. So Councillor Johnson's really right. We're setting ourselves up for a really comms disaster if we don't get this right. So I think the headline number is incorrect because it will not eventuate. I've got some thoughts about the inflation as well. I think you're setting us up with inflation, guessing inflation as well. So could we potentially have something at the side that's in big text that says, note, not all 7 councils are committed to this option? Because we're going to get people will just go to the lowest, and then we'll get possibly thousands and thousands of submissions, and we know we can't. This won't happen. So I really do think you've got a looming comms disaster unless you alter what you've got in front of you. Can you do that?
Through the chair, certainly can. Perhaps we may have anticipated some of the questions that might come today as well. If you choose to do so, it might be worthwhile just getting all of the remaining questions actually out onto the table. If we do need to bring and we'll just adjust our timeframes as we might need to as well. But if we do have to bring another document back to you next week, and we'll just lay this on the table for the while we just do a little bit more work based on the questions and things that you have, we could bring that back to you next week and for a sign off before going out if you choose to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for the work. I'm just looking at page 24 of the document under option 3, $3,442 $1,000, sorry, per year. In that little bit on the red that says it includes inflation but does not include nature's call levy. So if we wanted to, and in the agenda it says that under 2.6 it says most up-to-date costings. That's been updated obviously since December. Where could we find a breakdown of what makes up that 3,442?
So that figure is based off the adopted long-term plan.
So the status quo, are you saying? I'm just really struggling to believe that why or what are the big things that are driving that level of increase if that's not counting nature's calls?
So that's our work program in the long-term plan as it stands, but it looks like Cam wants to add some value there.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I think what that's actually trying to say is that the connection cost, I think it includes nature's calls, and so you wouldn't have the levy that is currently proposed in the long-term plan. I think that's what it's trying to say.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused because in that little bit of red
sorry,
writing.
that's wrong. That is the PNCC per connection cost as per the LTP. The $1,000 of nature calls is on top of that figure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm understanding that correctly.
Yep. So for real simplicity, the total cost including nature calls would be $4,442.
That's what I'm reading.
If the levy is $1,000, remembering that the LTP phrasing was at least 1,000, so it could be higher still.
Okay. Okay, I'll move on. Sorry. So in terms of the preferred option, page 17 of the document, I note that those community. I'm looking at the community affordability part of that, and for each of the options, you know, these bullet points, it's got option 1 and 2 being that they are affordable, and option 3 that it's not affordable. I'm just wondering, and under this option that's $2,656 per year plus at least $1,000. Oh, no, that's including the $1,000. Okay. So are we assuming that if we add $2,656 to someone's rates on top of the other increases, that that's affordable for our community? Or should we be calling that fundable? I'm just trying to, affordable seems like a very absolute word to use, and I'm just wondering, is fundable a better word for that?
We also had that same debate a number of times,
Yeah.
and because the issue is we don't know what is affordable for different people.
Yeah.
Which is definitely why we've got the word more there. And the word affordable we need because of those legislative words about it needs to be a financially sustainable and affordable option for there. We could add another sentence that says, you know, that clarifies that more under that clause for our community.
So in terms of what's financially sustainable, I don't know if that's defined anywhere, but I think there's quite a difference between something being fundable and affordable. Can we differentiate? Is there any way that we can differentiate between whether we're talking about whether something's fundable and whether something's affordable in the way that we communicate in this document?
Yeah, I absolutely understand your question. I also just think the fundable piece is not quite the right word either, because if we take Nature Calls as the case at the moment, that's currently not fundable by PNCC. So we need external funding to support that. So I think we could work on a word there, but I'm not quite sure if fundable is the correct word either. But absolutely take your point about affordable, and yeah, it is in legislation about that at the moment.
Okay, and just the assumption or the conclusion that Nature Calls is not affordable under option 3, given that we've asked to go back to the drawing board to look at other options and are awaiting that feedback, what is it correct for that to be such an absolute statement to say that it's not fundable under status quo option?
Yes, by definition of the new legislation, it's not fundable.
Is that assuming that everything else that's currently in our LTP stays in it?
Yes. So option 3 is very much our LTP and all the assumptions that go with that, including external funding for Nature Calls. You're right, awaiting the wastewater standards, as was referenced earlier, could change that, but it's far too early to know what that's going to do at this point.
Okay, thank you.
So that we're talking water work in the LTP, aren't we? Not just everything. We're talking about the waters. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You'll have to come back in. There's plenty waiting. Councillor Bellin.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. I had some questions about the economic regulator that's going to be established. That's only mentioned twice that I can see in that document. And I just wanted to unpack, will councils be paying for the establishment and running of that regulator, or would the entity that will be established be responsible for that?
That's a really good question. Until the new entities are set up, it will be council, and I think the piece that's open for consultation at the moment is that councils will pay from next year. However, that's very much a consultation piece at the moment, and once the new entities are stood up, then those costs would be borne by the new entity.
Thank you. And so on page 29, there is the orange box at the bottom there does talk about an estimate of $14 million to set up a new entity. Is that incorporating an economic regulator establishment fee, or is that an additional extra, a bonus?
So the estimate of 14 million is the costs of setting up the organisation, the new software stacks, programs, HR functions, all of that type stuff. There is, I'm not sure if it's in the consultation document, but I'm aware there are some ongoing operating costs as well for the new entity, and the economic regulation is included in those costs.
Excellent. Are we able to make that distinction a little clearer, perhaps on page 29, that is an additional cost for the next couple of years anyway, until an entity is stood up? So we can at least say we've had it transparently, that there's extra surprise costs in there.
Yep, lives on it. I just probably would clarify until that's confirmed. We probably can't. We'll just have to be careful around wording. Yeah.
An indication perhaps would be good. Does the Act, just based on the previous conversation, does the Act or the Acts or the bills define affordable, or is that based on other terms that are defined?
I might need some help here, team. But affordable has, I think, three parts. One is financial sustainability, one is asset investment, and there's a third one, which name is escaping me right this second. And all three together is the definition of affordable under this legislation.
Right, thank you.
I think the third one's, through Mr. Chair, I think the third one's revenue sufficiency.
Brilliant, thank you. That's helpful. And I just wanted to ask, has the government let out a public consultation on this? What's the nature of the government-led consultation being on it?
Sorry, Katie, just to clarify, do you mean on Bill 3?
Any of them?
Essentially, the consultation document came out prior to Christmas, so a little bit earlier than we had anticipated, which was in some regards particularly helpful for us through the guidance of developing the consultation document. We also were given an extended period of time to reply, which you may recall at the 5th of December, we had indicated that we thought the Mayor NCE may have to sign off the submission under delegation. That hasn't been a requirement given the extra timing. So we have until the 23rd of February to get the submission in.
Yeah.
So essentially a government-led process, I suppose, to respond to your question.
Are they open to the public, or is that sort of stakeholders consultation?
No, it is open to the public. So individually, people have an opportunity to feed in. We have been supported through multiple webinars that both Water New Zealand and Taituara have presented to councils specifically. There has been a lot of industry interest, obviously, to feedback through the submission process as well. We would expect it to be quite substantial.
Do we have any clue or insight into what the public feedback volumes have been, or we don't have any insight into that?
Not at this point, we don't. Probably more so from an industry point of view.
Thank you. And just finally, what further legislation or policy statements are still to come? What are we? Obviously, Bill 3's come out since we've made our decision on what options. What other ones are we expecting to come in the future?
I think, Councillor, the last one that we're aware of will be the national standards from Taumata Arowai for wastewater.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Through the Mayor, possibly some further work just as well about the economic regulator as well. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Your question on inflation made something click for me. So if I can just ask a question on the numbers, for example, on page 16, our option 1. So when I opened this document, I was quite underwhelmed when it said, well, we'll be paying $2,656 in 10 years and it'll only go down $62 in 30 years' time. Yeah, that doesn't seem like much. But assuming, for example, 2% inflation from year 10 to year 30, that means if you inflated that figure of 2,656 at compounding 2%, that'd work out to 3,947. Am I wrong in my understanding of where the inflation of these figures is at?
You are wrong, yes.
So where is it actually at?
Those are the inflated figures.
So that's what I'm saying. So one figure is working with 10 years of inflation. Is the 2,594 figure working with 30 years of inflation?
Yes.
Yeah. So my suggestion is that if you inflate that 2,656 figure for another 20 years, works out to almost 4,000, but we're actually getting a reduction. So we're not just saving $62, you're actually saving almost $1,400. To have a decrease despite almost 48% inflation is quite remarkable.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to ascertain is the real figure, the real reduction is actually a lot more impressive than just $62, but that's not at all reflected in this document, which makes people think, you know, it's really just nothing at $60. It's not a material amount.
Yeah, yeah, you did right, and that's where I sort of referred to the trend over time. So if you take inflation away, yes, the number does go down quite a bit, and if I can recall correctly, although I'm getting the figures checked, I think it's about 1,600 is the uninflated number over at year 30. So yeah, there's about $1,000 of inflation in there. I will check those figures though, and we'll work with Liv on how we can show just the impact of that inflation over such a long period. As you're right, it does significantly change the number.
I appreciate that because mine's just a desktop analysis, but I think I'll save that for comment. I think that's important. I did have another question. I can't remember what it was, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, team, for the hard work put in to get us here. Just a couple questions. One's on page 9, it looks like, of the document, which is the lovely picture of the Tautia Dam. And then on the right-hand side there, it has the breakdown of the 3 different sums for drinking water, wastewater, stormwater. And it just relies on the fixed charge component there. My understanding was that accountants in particular have been very hard at work working out how much kind of extra of the activity within City Council was kind of subsidizing some of that activity. So is the total of these 3 exactly the total that we are spending, or is there some money that's unseen in this figure?
That is the total of what we're spending. So I guess the slight caveat there is around the general rate, so it might not be $167 per property, but we only rate through these charges the cost for the 3 waters activities. So there is no subsidising other parts of council from that. There are costs from parts of council going into those activities, such as the overheads and things like that, but those are all included in those charges.
Thanks. I guess that's what I was trying to get at. Wasn't suggesting that the fixed charge for drinking water was being used to pay for the lights in this room. What I was wondering about is how much of the overheads and other activities within council are actually topping that figure up so that the 957 is actually appearing artificially low.
The 957 is not low. That is actual costs for the water activity for Palmerston North City Council.
And that's after we've been through all the segmentation and splitting the 3 water staff out in their own unit and loading them up with their own costs and everything.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. So the only further question then is, why have we kind of broken that down into small hundreds rather than actually going with the headline figure of 957 that could actually be more of a like for like comparison for the typical member of the public that will look through this and get a shocking amount of sticker shock, seeing hundreds go to multiple thousands.
We can do that for the drinking water and the wastewater. Obviously, the stormwater is the more problematic one when it's based on land value. But also from our conversations with the other councils, they also have like these kind of intricacies with how they charge. So our colleagues, say in Kapiti, for example, will have to, and even Horowhenua will have to explain different volumetric pricing per things like that. So I guess I'm happy to like group the drinking water and wastewater, and then we could maybe explain the stormwater on top of that.
But then how, if that's the deal, then how can we get over to page 16 and just have one number? Like, surely we can make it easy for people to understand.
So this talks to the assumptions that we've put into the financial model, and we've referenced water meters in the consultation document and volumetric charging. That's indicative costs based on that kind of charging methodology. Obviously, we don't have that here right now, so we've got what we do right now versus what we predict as part of those assumptions to be the case by the new entity.
Thank you. My other question builds on some of the questions that Councillor Johnson was working through. Page 20 around option 2. Do we, and just looking at the dollar signs there in the really big font, today, do we have numbers at hand that would allow us to change that to a range that would show the range from, say, 2 players through to 8 players? Or is that further work that would need to be done to put a firm dollar figure range against option 2?
Can I just get the CEO to respond?
Through the chair, I think that goes to the question from Councillor Johnson that we'll just have a look at some mechanisms of being able to do that. And yeah, so happy to have a look at how we might go about that.
Given the sensitivity around that number, and numbers in general in this space, would your advice then be that that comes back to council for further consideration, or that that is sitting in edits post approval?
Through the chair, I think that that's where it's heading, is coming back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, thank you very much for the presentation. I've just got a couple of questions. Just going to the report, and it's page 42, where you talk about changes to the Water Services Act and to reduce the regulatory burden of the drinking water quality regime and improve proportionality in terms of application of regulatory powers. Just want to get some comment in terms of whether that's represented in the consultation document and what does that actually mean?
I'll have a go at responding to that. So from a general context point of view, we know that the influence of the new regulation that is coming in, for us, it's a little bit of an unknown given the position that we're in particular with some of our larger CapEx projects. We have had a lot of conversation about, in particular from the consultation document, how is it that we best articulate that? But because there is so much uncertainty, it does create some difficulty for us to be able to include specific detail, I suppose, in the consultation document. Through the conversations that we've been having with the likes of the DIA, etc., trying to get a better understanding, I guess, at a really high level of what some of those impacts might be, is what is influencing our thinking at this stage. But again, as I said, the difficulty is that we don't actually have a clear picture to be able to be very concrete in our position on that.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure that gives me much reassurance. Quite clearly, from my read of it, is that our consultation document really is very light in that regard, which you've just covered off. So does that really kind of speak to a disconnect between DIA and the process which councils are actually having to push through to meet the timelines? And is there anything that we can actually do to try and actually close that gap?
I think, as the CE indicated before, the timelines that we're trying to work towards are very difficult, and we're very cognizant across the whole entire project that if we delay making decisions, then we're going to run into election time. This is a very fundamental decision for council. So what we've tried to do from a project point of view is to look at it and say, how can we best progress through this process with the best information we have available at the time? The difficulty, I suppose, for everybody in this space across the whole country is that the 3rd of September to produce or lodge a water services delivery plan is the key timeline that we're all trying to work towards. And without having that full visibility or the full understanding of what some of those implications are going to be from the regulator is quite difficult.
Yep, thank you. And I suppose just the last question I've got, just in terms of the public engagement and the drop-ins, what's our thinking in terms of inclusion of elected member input to that?
Yes, I've done a little slide deck that I was going to attach in your email on Friday night. We would love to have you at as many things as you would all be able to attend. And again, that's another reason, I guess, why we've tried not to have this big overlap with the annual budget, so that you are able to attend different things where you are able. But I'll send you something on Friday with our rough plan and some proposed dates that we'll just alter if we come back next week, so that you can have a bit of a steer on that as well.
Thanks, Liv. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one more question around the social impact of all three options. I noticed that the option, I'm just looking on page 17, under the social impact, it says better social impacts than option 3 as council can maintain to invest. I think that probably is meant to say continue to invest in other areas and help create connectedness. And I noted that the assumption in options 1 and 2 was that council would be continuing to invest in other areas, and that the assumption in option 3 was that there would be a loss of services. And I'm just wondering on what basis that those assumptions were made.
This feels like a very finance question, and deep down. So I'll take this one. When the water services revenue is no longer collected by PNCC, our debt limit becomes lower. So then you'll remember through our long-term plan, we had lots of conversations around maintaining our capital profile to fit within that debt headroom. We'd be having to have those same conversations again at a much lower level when we take the revenue from waters away.
Yep, so I understand why option 3 isn't fundable, but on what basis was the assumption made for option 1 and 2 that council would continue to invest in all other areas despite the significant increase that we're talking about, 2,500 odd for ratepayers? So if they're having to pay an extra 2,500, why would we assume that everything else that's in the LTP still continues?
So with option 3, we would have a whole lot of additional regulations to meet for the water services. So we would more than likely have to direct a lot of our funding into those services, therefore having to look at what we could do for other council services to reduce that to keep within our debt headroom. That's the underlying principle of option 3. The regulation that's coming in will require us to spend money in water.
Okay, sorry, I'll just try once more. I understand why the assumption is that we need to reduce services under option 3. I'm trying to understand why under option 1 and 2, even though we've increased costs by around 2,500 per year per ratepayer, why we've made the assumption that we council would continue to invest in all of the areas. So under the social impact, the way it's worded, it feels I would understand that all of that other stuff still will go ahead.
Can I just get the seed answer? I understand cost will be shared, but
Yeah, through the chair, let me just also just perhaps it might be a question back to start off just to get clarity around it as well. Are you asking about what happens or what decisions are made about the remainder of council business if waters was to go out?
Yes.
And what decisions it would be done through the same cycle that you do now about LTPs and long-term plans for any other additional investment that you might choose to do as a council with waters being shifted out into a CCO. So that will be a council decision about any other future investment, what that looks like, and whether you go ahead with projects or not.
And that's my understanding too. So that is why I'm asking why it's worded in this way that makes an assumption that council can maintain or continue to invest in other areas under option 1 and 2.
Yeah. So the key words are there is council could continue to invest. Doesn't mean that you are making a decision to invest. Your decisions will be around the table through LTP processes and the like, as you currently do now.
Okay, perhaps that's a better word to use. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify, probably the CEC or to anyone really, once the water system is taken away from council and we no longer have to pay for it, what sort of percentage rate drop would you expect to see?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, is that at the end of the day, that's a decision for around this table. However, I think that if you sort of perhaps read between the lines of what the government's expectations are around moving waters out into other entities, is that councils don't continue then to uplift their other parts of their business to a point where the rate amount that you have now is the same as what a new water entity would be, and you're effectively doubling the price to your constituents or ratepayers. Perhaps also there's been conversations about rate capping recently as well, and whether or not that's a mechanism that the government may also look to introduce on the remainder of council business. No decisions have been made around that at the moment, but those conversations have started to happen around the place as well. So probably the shorter answer of that is that it will be this council's decision about separating out the water aspects of it and the revenue and that associated with that. That cost will potentially come under a different bill and different mechanisms there. Council's current rates would go like this, and you make decisions then about what else you might wish to invest in the community moving forward.
Okay, could anyone give me a figure of what percentage of our rates goes to the waters at the moment? Do we know?
Oh yeah, we could probably bring that back to you, councillor, as well. Anyway, I've got a feeling this report's going to come back, so we could look to bring that back to you with that as well.
Thank you.
All right, councillors, I think we've probably posed more questions than answers here, but I'll close off that question side unless there's anybody else. So thank you to the office, and just want to acknowledge that hugely difficult subject, and we're the ones that know a lot about it, and we're asking more questions. What are our public going to do? You know, what are the residents going to do? So I honestly think that we need to have a second round of this. So I'm going to move an alternative motion to what's here, rather than just accepting this document with some edits. I think it needs to come back to us again. I'll be honest, I haven't seen the numbers. I got the numbers when you got them, and I had some immediate questions. So, and one of them was around, inflation, not inflation, guessing what that is, and I'll talk to that in a moment. But I do think if we just move an alternative motion that the document we give some direction on perhaps those edits as well, edited and brought back to council for approval on the 12th of February meeting. That still gives everybody the wriggle room to do things, and enables officers to go away, beaver away, and come back with some other options. And I say to that, some other options. So on that sort of direction, first of all, is there a seconder to that? Yeah, thanks, Councillor Johnson. Can I just start with the numbers, and just teasing out and just bearing in mind what's happened at a government level with all due respect to experts and expert advice. We've seen economists, government agencies, local, and with all due respect, local officers and government officers, and central government bureaucrats and the Reserve Bank get things quite wrong in that space. I've looked, and it was teased out by Councillor Wood in some of his questioning too, and we don't actually pair back to what is the number, what is the actual number plus inflation. So my feeling is that we need to have an option there that shows without inflation what is the number, and it's clearly identified that it's plus inflation. So rather than Bill, and it feels strange that we're giving all this power to Bill to come up with a number, and it sort of dictates what some options might be. Let's play with the actual numbers. We know what they are, and then it's plus inflation, because inflation may be the same as what's here, it may be less, it may be more. So I just think they are numbers we don't know, and I have to say it's a guessing game. So I just don't want to play guessing, because this is a massive decision. The second thing is around option 2. Councillor Johnson pulled it out that that option 2 is very unlikely to happen, because I know through my colleagues that Whanganui, Rangitikei and Tararua are not coming into any joint at this stage. So we've got to be really honest with our public and say that is not happening. So we've got to somehow say, look, we want 7 or 8 or more, whatever it is. But the number, we've got to be really clear on that number, that it's unlikely to happen. And we know that at least 3, possibly 4 of our councils around us are not up for that regional model. They've got other options and other models, sub-regional, other districts. And so maybe we shade that out and we clearly show. I don't want it on a website and then you refer to a website, because people will look at this and make some decisions off this. So it needs to be really clear. And I think also these numbers are at this time. And we know that there's new national water regulations, wastewater regulations especially, coming and in literally weeks, and potentially new options for our big Nature Calls wastewater plant decision. And that's almost certainly going to skew things as well. And it'll affect budgets and ultimately what that ratepayer cost will be. So I know we can only do what's in front of us at this time, but in March we will have a set of clear national standards, which is the law, which will be the regulation. And we know that it won't be we're being told that it won't be what is currently there at the moment. So my take on today is that the consultation document be edited, come back to council on the 12th, that we show an option of numbers plus inflation, that we have an option that shows on option 2 in the document which councils are possibly going to be there and which councils possibly that have already made council resolutions that they're not going to be in it. So we're not guessing there. And we possibly need to explain that all these costs are more than likely to change because of the new national standards. If we don't, then we're setting everyone up for a bit of a fail. So I hope I know it's doing things, we're delaying things, but I think it's imperative to have all the data as much as possible before we make some final decisions. So I hope you understand that. All right, I'll go to Councillor Johnson first as the seconder.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to second, and I think I know we're under time pressures, but at the same time, if we're to have a genuine and meaningful consultation with the community, we've got to put the best information we can before them in the document. And I agree with the changes that you've listed up there. In particular, option 2, it's not only which councils are possible for option 2, but the effect that that would have on the potential costs for option 2. Because if I understand the community correctly, people are mostly going to be driven by what the cost is going to be. And if we can't put in the document a realistic estimate of what the cost is going to be, then we're going to skew the decision making. So I think it's really important that in option 2, we not only talk about which councils are possibly left, but what effect having a group of 4 or a group of 5 would have on the cost. We've got these big headline figures in the document, but they're not realistic if we're not at least modifying them to include the information that we already know. And, and I appreciate there's an element of uncertainty. We all do. But at the same time, let's do the best job with the information that we have at hand. The one other thing that I think we should also make some change to in the document is whether Nature Calls costs are in or out. So that little tiny orange print, and by the way, orange on white is really difficult to read, that little tiny print that says Nature Calls in or Nature Calls out, I think that's what pass people by. Either the costs of Nature Calls are in all of the headline figures, or they're for preference, or they're out all of them. But we can't have 2 where they're in and 1 where it's out, as it's not a fair comparison. And we're asking too much of the community for them to do the research themselves. I agree with the mayor. There's only really the super keen people that are going to be going to a website to look at more detail. So let's try and get all that in the document as clearly as possible and make it clear where the uncertainties lie and where things might change, and the things that change might well not be within our hands. In particular, what option of councils to go with we have, because that's not totally sitting with us. That's sitting with decisions that other councils might make. So I think a week's delay is not much in the scheme of things for such an important issue, and it will allow us to put more realistic and as accurate as we can at the moment, reflecting what we know at the moment, information in front of the community. So happy to support this this alternative recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to emboss the point I was trying to make in my question, because I know it's a little bit complicated. I don't know if I'm just slow and it clicked for everybody else, but when I saw the figure and went, oh, well, particularly for option one, there'll only be $62 of savings over 30 years. It didn't click to me that that actually is a significantly more of a saving than it is at its headline. So if you were, say, paying $100 of your water bills today, and in 20 years' time, your actual bill was estimated to be $98, we would go, okay, well, I'm only going to save $2 over another 20 years. But actually, that $100 inflated at 2% every year works out to $140 is what you should be paying. So the fact you're only paying $98 is a $42 saving, not just a $2 saving. But cumulative inflation isn't something that comes naturally to most people. It's not an intuitive figure for people to be able to grasp. I certainly didn't when I read it the first time. It wasn't until the Mayor's questions that it clicked. And so I think it would be important, because I can appreciate trying to remodel everything without inflation, maybe more than a 1 week exercise, that at the very least with the inflated figures, we make it clear that that 2,656 down to 2,594, we give the community a figure of what the actual, inflated or not inflated, I don't mind, but what the actual decrease in what they'd be paying is. Because if we don't do that, it all looks like a bit of an exercise in futility, really. So I don't actually, an answer from Cam, he said it would actually be around $1,000 in real figures. That's not a futile exercise if you think $1,000 a year out of a person's pocket, but that's certainly how it appears in these figures. So I'd support not just providing uninflated figures, but actually providing that real difference in terms of what people pay over time, which if we aren't able to do it through fully remodel everything without inflated, we at least give the figures, including inflation, what that decrease would be. The point around option two, I quite like Councillor Barrett's suggestion around perhaps we give a range of what would be the worst case scenario versus the best. I don't know if Palmerston North and Ruapehu as accommodation, I suspect would probably be the worst. Give that figure versus the best with everybody in so that people can then see the range, so they can see it's high risk but probably reasonably low reward in terms of what those options are. It's important we have it there, so we do have options if, say, 4 of the 5 of us we looked at going that way, that we've got some range in the middle. But if we provide a range, in my opinion anyway, that would give us a more accurate reflection of what the worst case, absolute worst versus absolute best would be, with the truth lying somewhere in the middle. Because if we don't do that, there's 21 possible combinations of these 7 councils, and unless we have some sort of matrix where we show what all 21 combinations could look like, which would be an exceptionally difficult piece of work to do, I suspect, that could be a way that we can sort of fairly show some sort of middle ground. But very happy with the direction this is going and look forward to having it come back to us next week. Good luck to our team with all the work we're putting on you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question just on that timing, if I could, through you to the CE. So that the document be edited and come back to council on the 12th of February, I think we're all aware that that's not actually a week, because that means doing it tomorrow. Is that possible?
Through the chair, there's a bit of work to do.
Getting bigger by the minute.
We'll look to do our best on it. It might be that I just have a conversation with the Mayor about, given the fact that you've been through the bulk of the documentation today, you've asked some specific questions and just focused on some key issues, and whether or not it's appropriate for us to be able to table that document close to the day for you, whether or not you're okay with that. Perhaps you might like to provide some commentary back on that, Councillor.
I can do that. Thank you. And just to follow up on that, then should it come back next 12th, I think you said in your comments that shouldn't have an impact on the dates in next steps that have been signalled, just to confirm.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, it will have an impact, but it's effectively by a week. It might mean that we just have a think about when hearings are, and it's probably more work for Hannah and her team juggling some things around as well. I'm sure she's smiling right now. Yeah, but we'll see how we go around that.
Thanks for that, Wade. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing the questions. I don't think Hannah was smiling. I think that was a grimace. Yeah, thank you. colleagues actually for where this has got today. So when I got the consultation document, I thought this is a great read, and it was. And congrats to the team on distilling some really complicated information and in a very mobile environment into something that gives us a snapshot of where we are now and the decisions that we're asking our community to give us their views on. I thought it was an excellent piece of work, although I did have a few comments at the time. But I think like Councillor Wood, I think when I read it and I saw that $62, I thought that seems like a lot of work for not much payback. So I'm pleased with where we've got to with these options of going, let's try and make that meaningful to people and show the potential range of impacts that we're looking at. So thank you to colleagues for the options that have come through, for the additional edits that have come through there for the new document. I think that will help us to go out with something that's more engaging and more realistic for people, that they understand the complexity of the decision that we're making and the environment that we're making it in. None of this is easy. None of it is straightforward. I really don't want to see a matrix of 21 possible combinations and what that might look like. I'm also very nervous about words like best and worst when we're talking about our regional colleagues. I don't think we want to start a best friends list for them. But these are the very real conversations that we have to have with our community, and I'm sure our communications team won't be using words like best and worst. So on that basis, happy to support. Thank you.
I think some of those lists may already exist, but anyway, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a real deep concern about the whole system and what is happening. We have people on fixed incomes, particularly those on super, who today in their properties, they can't afford to pay for general maintenance, and their properties are devaluing every day. And even worse, those who rent, because you can bet your boots the landlords will put the extra charge on the rent. We have got older people who are living out of cans, who can't afford to pay, just buy meat some weeks. In the middle of winter, they go to bed at 7 o'clock at night because they can't afford the electricity to heat their houses. And I look at these figures, an extra 2,000 here and a 2,000 there. How on earth are people on fixed incomes going to match this? I think our government owes us a little bit more information about how they're going to help fund it. Because I know from the stories I hear, and I'm not going to bore you with a whole lot of them, from older people, how desperate they are. And I mean desperate. And when we look at this and I see these figures, I think, how are they going to survive? We really have to look seriously at any way of cutting back and keeping the prices down. Because the vulnerable people in our community cannot afford to pay any more. At the moment, they're going without. I've heard jokes at council about, oh, it's only a loaf of bread. Well, I know of older people that get 2 loaves of bread a week. And they use things like baked beans and corn out of tins, and that's how they survive. A loaf of bread's an awful lot to that person. We really seriously have to consider what we're doing and look for the cheapest possible way out.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning. Like Councillor Finlay, cost increases always concern me. And, there is a lot of hurt out there. There was a gentleman the other day washing himself in the Memorial Park paddling pool. And hopefully there's not more things like that to come. Not only option 2, option 1 also concerns me. I think we need to be 100% sure who we're telling the public that are interested in going with us, like Manawatu Hora from the Kapiti Coast. We're 100% sure that those entities want to come with us. we need to be 100% certain. So I'd certainly like that reflected here as well. And I certainly have a lot of worries, and I'm pleased this is coming back with more information. Thank you.
Councillor Sabellin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just staff, well done. What a mammoth effort to try and put all of that into plain language. I think we really need to seriously push back against the due date for the water services delivery plan. That is what is driving this pace, and it's just irresponsible. We're backed into a corner by an arbitrary deadline, and because of nature calls, the wastewater standards are massively impactful, and we're flying blind with that. By the time we get them, this ship will have sailed and it'll be too late. So we are couching this as one of the most important decisions that we're going to make for decades, and we need the time and the evidence to get that right. And this is helpful, but tweaking the CD does not change the underlying critical flaw, or the fact that we are presenting one non-viable option, half a plan, and then a concept of a plan. Despite the fact that concepts of plans get elected, I don't think we're going to feel materially any better or more comfortable in a week because those flaws are still there. I think perhaps the strongest way we can indicate this is to change the whole design scheme of the document so that there are just literally red flags all over it. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with what Councillor Isabella has just said. I do support this recommendation because I'm not comfortable with the current format of the consultation document, but I do also doubt that by next week I'll be comfortable with it either. Certainly we can work on improving it, but I think we're mucking our community around to go and consult with them about something we know so little about, that's changing constantly. I would prefer to put it off until we do actually know a little bit more, when the government's actually made the decisions that it needs to make to inform us about, so that we can give our community much more clear information. If we are going to consult and use this document, I think it needs to be much clearer. I think we need to compare apples with apples. I think Councillor Barrett's question around comparing what we pay now to the big numbers that are here under option 1, 2, and 3. This is talking about what they could be paying in 10 years. You know, I think we need to say, what are you paying now? What will you pay once this is up and running under this option and this option and this option? And I agree with Councillor Johnson. It needs to be consistent whether nature calls is in or out, not in tiny little print. For nobody's going to pick that up. So I'm also very concerned about affordability, along with Councillor Finlay, and I'm very happy to hear his suggestions about cutting back and keeping the prices down, and I do hope that translates to his voting when it comes to looking at the annual budget. I absolutely believe that many people in our community don't even believe their rates are affordable now, and what is showing in this document is that they're going to have to pay a significant amount more. It's not clear from this document how much more than what they're paying now that will be, and I think we need to make that much more explicit. They need to be able to say, this is what I'm paying now. If this change happens, what will I be paying then? Not in 10 years' time. It's too much up high pie in the sky. So affordable, we need to change our language. Whether it's affordable, it's offensive to people in our community to tell them that something that they're going to be paying up to $2,500 more for is going to be affordable if they don't even believe their rates are affordable now. And if they're going to have to make decisions about whether they can still heat or whether they can still eat as a result of this, I think we need to change our terminology. Revenue sufficiency or whatever it may be under the legislation, we need to talk about what's fundable or whether what's able to be funded or whatever officers come up with. But the word affordable is really inappropriate, I believe, to use to say this is affordable, this isn't affordable. So I'll leave it there, and certainly happy to engage with it next week, but I do seriously doubt whether we'll arrive at something what is reasonable to actually engage appropriately with our community about next week.
Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Your Worship. I don't disagree with anyone and the contribution that people have made. In fact, I do agree with everything that they've said, but I wanted to stand and say well done to the staff. I'm looking at the team up there, I'm thinking, my God, my head would be spinning because it's constant, the landscape's constantly moving for them. And, you know, like Councillor Finlay, I think that the government has got a lot to answer for putting us all under the pressure that we are. And the timeframes are in there. I know that our staff are working to these timeframes, but we, as Councillor Johnson said, we just haven't got the information required. And that is disturbing. And we also know that as kaitiaki of our community, of the people who live within Palmerston North City Council, that many of them are struggling, as Councillor Finlay had said. I think whether they're homeowners or whether they're renters, this is going to have a huge impact on them. And I too want to know, what is central government going to do? How are they contributing? Because we're not the only council in this country who are under this pressure. In fact, I'd say all of them are. And I would hope that local government NZ would be advocating really hard and pushing back on this. What Councillor Zabellin had said, completely agree with. If I, as wearing my Māori ward councillor portai, you know, only 25%, or actually, to be honest, 27.5% of Māori statistically are on the fact of owning a home. So 75% of them are renters who would be at the will of paying it. Now, not just Māori, but other people who are vulnerable as well. So, yeah, I'm going on record saying I just think this is a farce that we've been told to do things when we don't have all the information. But I do want to say a big thank you to staff. Kia ora.
All right, councillors. So we've got just on a right of reply there, and look, I don't disagree with anybody around the comments. The only thing I'd say is, we've got no choice. We've got to go out with something. We can't go out with nothing. We've already tried to push back, and we've been shown the big hand. And look, I agree with your comments, Councillor Zabellin, but we've got a second chance too of being able to understand what those national standards will have to us, because we've got the whole nature calls part of that to come, and that will probably equally be as challenging as well. But look, if we can show, and I mean ultimately affordabilities, we all want the best for our people. That's why we're around the table, and some of the numbers there have really scared me as well. And I only got them when you got them, and I challenge them now. And we're starting to find that potentially there is some stuff that we can show better. So ultimately, we want the best balanced option. And I do think the cost to ratepayers will be probably the number one driver for what people will go with. So let's show and highlight the true costs as of today, that will happen for next year and maybe year 3. And that's where I'll be pushing really hard, because it's very, very hard to guess a year 10 and a year 30. You can model that, but it's modelling. And that's the key word, modelling. So please, to the staff, you've done well to get this out there. There is some actual costs there for those that missed it on, I think, page 9 of what we pay today. But we need to know what they're going to be paying tomorrow and the true today's costs of that. So please, if you can take all those edits on board, and I know you'll do your best, and you've started well. So I think on behalf of all the council, thank you for the work that's been done so far. It's not a criticism. It's just some moulding into a better document. So if we could vote, please. And it's passed 16 votes for and none against, unanimous. Thank you. All right. I think we do need to have a cup of tea. So if we can come back into the chamber at 20 past, please.